welcome to Prep Talk Podcast, a podcast that provides valuable insights and guidance to students as they navigate the college admission process. In today's episode, we have a special guest, Anushka Bindra, a successful Tutela alumni who not only gained admission to Brown University but also achieved a 35 out of 36 in her SAT exam. We are thrilled to have Anushka here and share her expertise and experiences. So let's get started. Hi, Anushka. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Thank you for having me. Very excited.
It's a pleasure. All right. So, should we start with the first question?
Sure.
All right. So, what were your strategies with your ACT exam preparation? And scoring a 35 is a big deal. So, how did you do it? And what were the things you kept in mind that helped you gain such a good score?
So I think there are multiple blocks to gaining a good score. I was always told that you need like 10 months of preparation, you need at least 2 attempts. It always seemed as a big scary exam, and but for me, by the end of it, I did my ACT in December, and I applied to college in Jan, and I had my ICSE board exams in December. So I had very little time, and it was a 35 or nothing because I had an SAT score of 1480, which was not good enough. So for me, it was a 35 or nothing. And honestly, what really helped me was Ashish. So I think he was brilliant. He really helped analyze my weak points according to what my base scores were. So I guess one thing, mentally, you need to take the block out of your head. I think all of us get super nervous, especially with ACT, SAT, APs. You need to force yourself to believe that there is no other option but to do it. Of course, I had prepared for the SAT before, so I had a lot of prep for standardized exams. Right. But I think the mental block of this huge exam and so much pressure and with the time, you really need to work on the mental block, which was my biggest issue with the SAT and ACT.
Right. So you said that you did SAT initially and then you switched on to ACT.
Yeah.
So how did you take that switch? Because SAT and ACT are very different from each other.
Yeah.
And starting with SAT and then getting a bang on score in ACT, what do you think was that deciding factor to switch on your standardized test entirely?
So I got a 1480 in my first attempt in the SAT. I worked with Tutela for the SAT, but I'm not sure what was the lax. I think I misdiagnosed which test to take. I did a initial test for both SAT and ACT and scored a lot higher on SAT than I did ACT. But I don't think your diagnostic test should only be about which test you scored better in. I think I didn't take into consideration which test I found easier, more fun, which test was more with the skills I have, and my skills, I think I'm good at reading and analyzing. I think the science section was very high scoring for me. I think that when you're looking at your diagnostic, you need to be a little bit more mindful, not just look at the score, but also look at other factors that go into it.
Right. Okay. So moving on to the next question. Student resume is a very crucial aspect of going ahead with a broad education, right? And what was some advice that you would like to provide to the students who are, currently in the process that helped you make a standout student resume and land into, one of the Ivy Leagues?
So honestly, when I started off building this resume, I didn't really have college in mind. A lot of my activities were just things I did, and then around 11th when I was applying, I put it all together because I've always been someone with a lot of energy, and very honestly, 90% of the activities my mother put me into so that the energy would go away. But so I think I had a little bit of everything. I did dance for 5 years. I did Kathak and Kuchipudi for 3 years and 2 years each. I did sports for 12 years. I broke the state record for high jump, and I was a national athlete for 4 years. I also played the piano for 8 years. I did up till grade 5 and then quit the piano and just played it for fun, but I had 8 years of piano. And when I was in 7th grade, I started volunteering at a village school nearby. Growing up, my mother really encouraged volunteering and things like that. So this really had nothing to do with college, but I started volunteering. And over the years, it grew into sort of like my own NGO type thing. We raised money for COVID supplies. We did a plantation drive. I went every week and taught basic math and English. It's honestly mostly about building a connection with the people there. So that was a big part of my resume, because this was over the course of 6 years, it became quite a big project.
So you did a lot in terms of extracurriculars, and then you had the SAT and ACT prep going on, and you had your school academics that you cannot, compromise with. So how did you manage all of this at once? It must have been tough, I'm very sure. And the time management can get to you. It can be overwhelming for a lot of students. So how was your experience with managing so many things together?
Now, this is what I did. I don't know if this was the best way, and I don't know if other students should follow this. But for me, what ended up happening is every year of high school, I prioritized a different thing.
Okay.
So in grade 9, I really prioritized my sports. I trained 5 to 6 times a week. I became captain of the athletics team. And I really prioritized getting leadership positions in school based on sports. So that's how I became head of sports and captain and things like that. So that year I didn't focus too much on academics. Obviously you can't end up with like 50%, but 80%, 85, 80, 90, whatever. So my athletics became very strong. 10th grade, I focused very heavily on my academics and I focused on my NGO. I ended up getting a 98 and topping my school. So I got Scholar of the Year in Excellence in many different subjects. So that year I focused, obviously along with athletics, I focused on my NGO and I focused on academics. Now 11th and 12th were the 2 years where COVID hit. So this was a hard year, and this is when you had to focus on, other aspects of your. I was very strong in my extracurriculars, but 11th and 12th you needed to bring in research. So 11th and 12th I worked on 2 research projects, and I started bringing in the academic side of my resume. I worked on developing my NGO by helping COVID and things like that, but I also went to Qutub Minar and all of these historical sites, learned about the history, wrote about it in pamphlets, things like that, because I was applying as a history, political science applicant. And then 12th grade, of course, you revert back to academics and sort of tie everything in together. So for me, I think going year by year, making sure academics don't fall and prioritizing other things was helpful.
So, as a student, you just don't apply to one college. That would be a wise decision. What factors did your college options influence, and where did you end up? Which acceptances did you end up getting, and how did you finalize Brown as a last choice? Was it like the Ivy League tag that influenced the choice, or was it something that Brown really has that influenced the choice?
Honestly, Brown's been my dream school since 9th or 10th.
Okay.
So, everyone, when they're in grade 9, a lot of people look at the holy trinity of Ivies, which is Harvard and Princeton and Yale. But for me, it was always Brown. I always wanted to go to Brown. So I knew that if I was getting Brown, I'm going to Brown.
Right.
So I applied to actually 35 colleges. 20 on the Common App, 5 in the UK. I applied to 6 UCs. I just completely did an overkill. I applied to way too many colleges. And I think that's because I was in the COVID year, which was very unpredictable. You didn't know if you could be a topper and you could get in nowhere. It was such an unpredictable, such a difficult year. So I just over-applied to colleges. For me, I specifically chose Brown because of, number one, the open curriculum. In my first year at Brown, I've done calculus, biotechnology, and acting. I can't think of any other school where you can do such, international law, biotech, math. You can truly explore every subject. And there really is no restriction. And the open curriculum was really a big selling point for me. Number two, the clubs at Brown have a relatively low barrier to enter. That means once you've gotten into Brown, it's not that to get into a certain club or anything, of course it's competitive, but it's not unbelievably high barriers of entry because they encourage everybody to explore many different types of fields. So for me, the whole idea of be the best at something or don't try it was it's not a good idea. I wanted to learn things about investing, I wanted to learn theatre, I wanted to learn consulting. There's so many different things I wanted to learn. And the idea that Brown was a place that encouraged you to learn many different skills before you truly decide what you want to do was, again, a big selling point. Also, Brown has been ranked on multiple different websites as the happiest school in the United States.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, it encourages inclusivity and it's just a very friendly environment, which I absolutely love.
Great. So we'll come on to the environment stuff. We have questions on that. So before that, we'd like to know How has been your experience in Brown overall as far as academics is concerned? How do you find the professors and the classes and the students academic wise? How have they been?
So, academically, let's see. I think it's a very, very different way of learning. I personally did ICSE. I did ICSE and ISC. I did not do IB. And on standardized testing, I did two APs, ACT, SAT, and all of that. So I don't think college work is like work I've ever done before. Even though I had done two research papers, I found it challenging to adjust in college to some extent. I took a philosophy class which required, well thought out and well structured essays, which I don't think we got proper exposure to in curriculums like ICSE. So I think if you're coming from Indian boards, it's difficult to adjust for more of the philosophical, history, English, for a lot of the humanities classes, which was very interesting because I am a humanities, I was a student. And now, of course, I'm doing applied maths and economics as my major. But I've always loved humanities. On the math and economic side of things and the more science side of things, I think while India has a more vast curriculum, like in 1 year we learn a lot more than we're expected to learn in the US, I think the depth of understanding in the US is a lot greater. Like I remember I had a calculus homework question which I just was not understanding. I sent it to my friend who's studying in India and he's done much higher level calculus, but neither of us could figure it out because it wasn't really testing your ability to solve a question, it was testing your ability to apply the concept. It was an integration question that didn't have basic solving. It talked about structuring an integral in some different on a graph or something like that. And basic things like this, which we don't really look at over here, we're expected to know very thoroughly there, which I found challenging.
Right. So, do you think it would have made a difference had you been from an IB curriculum to, just gel better with the kind of curriculum that you had at Brown?
Not necessarily. I think both IB and ISC have their advantages. I think my peers from IB, while they have an advantage when it comes to research and writing and things like that, I think we have a much greater advantage when it comes to recall power. I'm able to recall and quickly learn large amounts of information. Also, when it comes to maths, we have, I think we're able to calculate much faster because in grade 9 and 10, we didn't have access to a calculator. So I guess mentally we're able to calculate a lot faster. And I think things like that, where ability to quickly recall large amounts of information, memorize terms, things like that is very, very helpful.
So, moving on to our next question, how was your navigation, like the entire transition from being an Indian student in an Indian school and being with family, and then all together in US, being all by yourself, and to an entirely new country? Was there a culture shock for you, and how did you adapt to the new environment?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I think. I think I found a lot of peace in having so many Indian friends around me. Even something small like talking in Hindi here, which we take for granted or barely do. It's like such a comfort in the US. We carry our Maggie packets and like late at night we'll make Maggie. But honestly, I think having international friends has been truly wonderful. My best friend, one of my best friends in the US is American and Korean, and I don't think I've been able to connect with a lot of people in the same way. I think if you're open to connecting with people from all over, everyone is very friendly and looking to make friends. Because remember, everyone's in the same journey, in the same boat. And honestly, the biggest challenge for me was the weather. It was so cold there. It's so cold. But I think the people are very friendly and everyone's looking to expand. So it's a good journey.
Yeah, so going ahead with the entire procedure of abroad education is to diverse yourself and be in that exact situation. But then for some students, it's not easy right in the start. They take time to dwell in the environment and open up.
There's a lot of support available in college. There's counseling, there's cultural associations, there's senior Mickle-Johns, at least in Brown, which is a senior you're partnered with to help you through your first year. So I'm saying there's so many resources. I just think if you're ever having a tough time in college, which I did for a bit. The weather and everything just had me very down. I think there are so many resources you can reach out to that really help. So that's one good thing to keep in mind.
That's very considerate of the college also. But then when you deal with such thousands of number of students from all across the world, that's sort of a very nice gesture on the part of the college that they're providing that kind of support.
They have a lot of mental health support, and they have an entire house for it's like called the Brown Student of Color House, especially for students coming from abroad, students of color. You can just go there, study, find a safe haven. They have an Indian students room where they have like a place to worship and things like that. So there's like a lot of support available.
That's nice that you do have a mandir at your school.
Like
that's
a makeshift mandir.
Yeah, that's very current over theme.
Not even like a proper one. Like they have one outside of college, and then they have like little shivlings and stuff in college. It's very makeshift, but it's very comforting.
But then I see a lot of Americans being influenced with Indian culture. Like,
Absolutely.
so maybe that's one of the part. But you describing me that you guys have a mandir in Brown University is very,
Keep in mind a makeshift and external mandir, not a proper mandir.
yeah, I get it. But still having an idol
Yeah.
in itself is a very huge thing. That how much as a culture India has developed.
Yeah.
So, can you share more about the extracurriculars activities in Brown? As you mentioned that you've been an outgoing person all your school life and you have been in some crazy extracurriculars. And how was it after going to college? Were you able to continue being 1 year over there? How was it? And were you able to continue the same, streak and the same activities that you used to do here?
I'm in my second semester. I got elected as the president of the Indian Student Association. So currently I'm co-president with a senior of mine, and we organize a lot of festivals on campus. We do Holi, we do Diwali, we do pujas. So I think we try and really keep the Indian spirit alive. There's an Indian restaurant in Brown, and for all of our meetings and gatherings, we order samosas and chaat and biryani. So one of my extracurriculars is the Indian Student Association, which I'm kind of advocating for Indians abroad. Then I was part of a consultancy club for a bit, and that helped me realize that I don't like consultancy. I'm doing intramural sports, we have a gym, and I was part of a theatre club, Starla, where we performed around campus. We did comedy, we had 2 or 3 shows. So I think I'm still in the mode of settling down and academically kind of getting into Brown, but I have been very involved with extracurriculars there.
So it's just your freshman year, and
It's
now,
just my freshman.
yeah. So you've done a lot in just your freshman year. So let's see what you're doing next. So did you miss India at all?
I really do, and I don't want to have a false perception. I've had, it's not all been easy and fun and great. Honestly, there can be very, very hard weeks where it's so cold, you miss your family so much, you literally don't want to leave your room. You just want to sit there and just sleep. But I think I've found really good support and friendship there. Like if 1 or 2 days I don't go for class or I'm sitting or it's just too cold and I'm done, my friend will get me food, she'll get me coffee, she'll sit with me. It's really, really nice. So I think, not to give a false perception, college can be very difficult, especially when you're international. But I think if you want, there is support to reach out to.
That's great to know. So what advice would you give to the high school students who aspire to attend Brown or any of the Ivy Leagues for that matter?
So, I mean, honestly, I shouldn't be saying this because this is all I did, but I compared my application to like every other application. Marks, Common App, my seniors, this, that. I think at some point you need to trust your gut. Actually, a lot of people, including my parents, told me to ED to Tufts. They said it's too competitive this year, you're not going to get Brown, just ED to Tufts. It's just not going to happen. And I was very close to doing an early decision to Tufts. And I don't know, something in my gut just told me don't do it. 5 years from now, you're going to regret it just because you'll never know.
Exactly.
And I'm not to say that not to ED to a school, a safety or anything like that, or a great school like Tufts or whatever it is. But I'm saying to some extent, you need to trust your gut. And it was the scariest decision I made not to do an ED because I was getting athletic recruitment at Tufts. They were recruiting me as an athlete. So it was a very, very, very good opportunity. But I think it was the hardest decision I made, and I'm so glad I made it because I trusted my gut.
It worked out for
It worked out
best.
very well.
Yes. So, in terms of building connections, and students also do internships in their college years. How has it been for you as a freshman? Do you see a lot of people interning, first year in the college, and did you do that? And how did that work out for you?
So that's actually a very good question. I think finding internship opportunities your first year is just incredibly difficult. Um, so what I did is I know that now that I'm doing math and economics, my sophomore, junior, and senior year are very important for internships, whatever I want to do. Um, this year, I'm taking time to work on my own project. I'm currently working on a bit of a startup, and I'm learning more about investing. So I'm trying to learn about how to invest my money, use my own stock portfolio to fund a startup and work a business. But I do know my friends who are interning at various companies. I think one friend is doing investing, another friend is doing consultancy at PwC. So I think it's not impossible to get an internship your first year. I think the people you know and the connections you have is very important. So I would definitely use whichever college you go to. In my case, Brown. We have massive alumni networks. We have our Brown Consulting Group, which is in direct contact with BCG, McKinsey, PwC, all of the massive firms. So I think getting in those firms, meeting people from these companies and all is a huge plus. But I made the decision this summer. I didn't apply for internships. I wanted to work on my own startup.
That's great. That's a very good decision in itself. And I think it's all about the practical knowledge when it comes to internships. Whether you're working is with a company or working on your startup, you're going to learn anyways doing the practical thing. And whatever you learn from books, it's much better when you do it, upfront on your own.
I was considering doing policy in the middle. I really, really wanted to work with the Niti Aayog as an intern, but I think there's more to be learned before I can look at an opportunity like that.
All right. So, moving on to our last question for the day. So, looking back at your 1 year in college, what do you think are the changes that you would like to make so that things could have been a little better in terms of anything?
Okay, so I've been asked this question before, and the singular advice I give is I literally worked on my essay till 11:57 of the deadline. I'm not joking. I submitted my Brown application at 11:59. And I think that's a bit obsessive. I think at some point you need to be able to let go, which I just was not able to do. And I think it's very unnecessary. I think the level of stress it caused me, my mother, my counselor, everybody was unbelievable. But by nature, I'm a perfectionist. I just feel the need to do those things. I think it's okay to let go. And yes, I had very good marks in 10th. I had very good predicteds. I had a good ACT, but I didn't have the best marks in 9th. I was in my 80s, lower 80s. And it took me 1480 and then I had to do ACT. It took me, one failed SET, not failed, 1480 is a good score, but it took me one average score to get to a 35 in the ACT. So I'm saying, don't lose faith. One bad exam, one bad ACT, one bad AP, whatever it is, it's not defining. The US looks at just too many more factors like your teacher recommendations, which is very important, so build a good relationship with your teachers and counselors. But just don't get bogged down by a few bad test scores or things like that. There's just so much more you can offer.
Right. So, with that, we conclude our today's podcast. Thank you so much, Anushka. Your insights have been really great, and it was so nice speaking with you. Also, if you would like to give some parting note to the podcast, that'll be great as well.
A parting note.
Yes.
I think it's important to push yourself very, very hard, but I think it's even more important to know when to just let go.
Right. So on that note, we leave everybody on this podcast. I'll see you next week with another podcast and another bright student from Tutela. Until then, don't forget to give us 5 stars if you're listening this on Spotify, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're listening to this on YouTube. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.